Thank you for joining us today for the Alliance for Water Efficiency's webinar on the 2022 State Policy Scorecard for Water Efficiency and Sustainability. Weird slide things going on. The Alliance for Water Efficiency is a member-based organization. We're a network of colleagues across water providers, governments, business and industry, researchers, nonprofits, and of course, a variety of other partners. We create and share resources, tools, trainings, expertise, and research. We work for change, advocating for funding, policies, and partnerships that advance water efficiency. So here's a brief agenda overview. We'll provide an overview of the scorecard and why we focus on state policies, the results, and then we'll hear from two wonderful guest speakers, Carol from Arizona and Holly from the state of Washington. The webinar is set to be about 60 minutes. It is being recorded and will be available for viewing later. If you have a question, you may use the Q&A option in this webinar. And since we have multiple speakers, as it makes sense for you, feel free to indicate who the question is for. We will do questions at the end. Our speakers today are Ron Burke, President and CEO of the Alliance for Water Efficiency, myself, Liesel, the Director of Programs at the Alliance for Water Efficiency, and we are grateful again for our guest, Carol Ward, Deputy Assistant Director of the Water Planning and Permitting Division in the Arizona Department of Water Resources, and Holly Myers, Director of the Office of Drinking Water at the Washington State Department of Health. Holly is also joined by her colleague, Karen, of the department's Water Use Efficiency Program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron to provide an introduction to our webinar today.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Liesel, and thanks to everyone who was able to join us today. And as I'm handing out the thank yous, let me also thank some of the organizations that helped fund this update to AWE's state scorecard, the Park Foundation, the many individuals and organizations who donated to the Mary Ann Dickinson Water Sustainability Fund. For those of you who don't know, Mary Ann is our founding CEO and my predecessor. And of course, our 500 plus members whose annual dues help support our annual operating budget and this project as well. Special thanks to our project partner, the Environmental Law Institute. I also want to give a big shout out to the many state agency staff who worked to fill out the survey that we sent that informed the development of the scores and the rankings, and more specifically, those state agency staff who participated on the project advisory committee. Thank you so much for your contributions. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview. Our state policy scorecard, thank you, is of course evaluating state policies to help support efficient and sustainable use of water. It is not an evaluation of local water agencies, nor their local policies. As you know, many of you on the call know, water is generally delivered and funded at the local level. We're looking, however, exclusively at state level policies with this scorecard. It's also not an assessment of actual water use, such as comparing gallons per capita per day across communities or states, nor is it an assessment of how available water is within a particular state. We're really focused on state level policy, and in particular, residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional water use. We definitely, our evaluation touches on agriculture water use in a number of ways. For example, we evaluated state funding for water efficiency, technical assistance. We looked at state water laws. These are all areas in which the agriculture sector is also impacted, but our focus was primarily on the more urban uses for water. Next slide, please. The goals of the scorecard are really to encourage states to adopt laws and policies that promote water efficiency and conservation, to highlight exemplary laws, to identify gaps and opportunities for states to improve. And along those lines, the report includes individual scorecards for each state with priority recommendations on how they could improve. Next slide, please. So when we think about water efficiency and conservation, drought often comes to mind, and in this climate change era, we're seeing more frequent and more severe droughts, of course. And this map from December, just a few weeks ago, highlights that in 2022, most states, nearly all states, actually experienced drought at some point. And so drought is obviously and water shortages, water stress, if you will, is one of the main reasons that we really, as an organization, try to advance water efficiency and conservation. Next slide, please. And obviously, a lot of us have been focused on the Southwest that's experiencing a prolonged drought. The Colorado River Basin in particular is dealing with significant water shortages and the need to substantially reduce water use demand. Next slide, please. Having said that, it's important to note that water efficiency is important across the entire US, not just in the Southwest, and not just when communities are experiencing drought. And that's because water efficiency has multiple benefits beyond saving water. It also helps reduce energy use and the related greenhouse gas emissions, increases resilience to weather extremes, helps protect our rivers, bays, aquifers, and lakes. It reduces the need for long-term capital expenditures. It helps reduce the cost of customer water bills. Outdoor water use efficiency when it comes to irrigation of crops and landscapes helps reduce chemical runoff and waterway pollution. It also helps communities manage through water supply disruptions, be that from an E. coli outbreak or freezes that cause pipes to break, things like that. Next slide, please. So water efficiency and conservation are very important across the entire United States, not just in the Southwest. So why evaluate state policies given that water services are primarily delivered and funded at the local level? Well, those local water providers, as well as businesses and building owners and residents, everyone who's involved in who uses water and provides water to communities, they're all experiencing increasingly costly and complicated conditions. It's because of climate change and other factors, emerging chemicals, aging infrastructure, for example. These are all factors driving cost up and just making water service more complicated to deliver. States can really support local water providers as well as others who impact water use, including land use authorities, energy companies, builders, businesses, and so forth, by providing financial and technical assistance, by adopting policies and requirements to help drive best practices across the entire state, by facilitating planning and cooperation across watersheds and political boundaries. State level policy is even more important today, given that Congress has authorized billions of dollars for water services as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. So many of those funds, those federal dollars, will be administered by states and really can only be maximized with good state policies in place. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Liesel now. We've talked about how important state level policy is, and Liesel's now going to walk you through some of the results from our analysis. Liesel.
Thank you, Ron. So as Ron introduced, this is really, the scorecard is looking at the set of state level laws and policies that advance water efficiency and conservation, sustainability, and affordability. And so we had a project advisory team that were made up a diverse set of state agencies, and they worked with AWE staff on what is now the third installment of the state scorecard project. We previously published state scorecards in 2012, 2017, and now in 2022. There's also been some kind of complementary supplemental deep dives on topics like water loss or water and land use connections. So to give you a sense of what went into the survey quickly is that we provided states with a 23-question survey, and a chunk of the questions largely remain the same since 2017. So those categories you see in the boxes or categories that were in place in 2017. And so we were able to pre-populate the surveys for the states from those answers. And then a new set of questions with the categories you see in the circles here were added this year. And those include water and land use planning, state funding for water bill assistance, some questions around water reuse, and then some questions around the water energy nexus. So let's jump into what happened. So some key takeaways, you'll see in the full report that there is a big table showing all the states where they ranked in 2022 and 2017 and their changes. And what we largely saw is that some states made some great improvements in 2017, but others made little or no progress on the scorecard categories. So not, of course, to say that there wasn't progress happening within the state, but in terms of what we were evaluating within the scorecard, we saw little or no progress. A shining bright spot is that 10 states adopted some level of point of sale plumbing efficiency requirements since that scorecard in 2017. And those requirements go beyond the federal standards. And so now we have a total of 15 states plus the District of Columbia with more efficient standards in place. We saw 3 states added water conservation planning requirements, and we saw that 19 states require some level of coordination among water and land use providers, planners. Where we saw some lack of state action or lack of progress, so there might be the same states that are still doing it, of course, but maybe very few new states, largely around funding for customer water bill assistance, water utilities, climate action planning, and drought preparedness planning. State funding for conservation and efficiency made little improvements. I think 1 state added there, and then supporting conservation-oriented rates. So we'll do deep dives into each of these here in a moment. New this year, here are the results. Here are the scores if you couldn't see that table before. But this year we made a move to a 1 through 50 ranking system rather than a letter grade system. Looking across the map, you'll notice that the top 10 spans the entire US. California maintained the top spot, perhaps unsurprisingly, with Texas and Arizona in the 2 and 3rd spot. They maintained those spots since the last round. The total number of possible points were 89, with a total possibility for 99 if there were some extra credit questions in there. The average score, however, was only around 23 points, demonstrating that states have great opportunity to affect change through their state policy levers. The lowest score, we did have some states with only 2 points, which was effectively 2 points for completing the survey. You'll see that the top 10 spans each of the regions in the US. The state of New York demonstrated the most progress since 2017 by adopting high efficiency plumbing standards, adopting requirements for water suppliers to develop drought preparedness plans, and providing funding specifically for water conservation. These actions moved New York into the top 10 to 6th place, and Washington, who we'll also get to hear from today, improved from 8th to 4th place by adopting high efficiency plumbing standards and scoring well on some of the new question categories like water and land use planning integration. New this year is also the addition of regional rankings to allow for comparisons among states who may be more similar in terms of water supplies, weather patterns, climates, and demographics. So highlighting states that might be able to work together or learn from each other based on other similarities. This map highlights who did the best in each region, and there's more on this in the full report. When we look back to 2017, we wanted to know where the most progress had been made across the US. And we compared the key questions that were in both surveys. And as I said before, we found that the most progress really had been around this point of sale requirement for plumbing fixtures, looking at toilets, shower heads, and urinals. Relatively little has changed since 2017 on the other categories. Let's dig in a little bit more on each of these and look at some of the new categories as well. States were awarded points if they had a standard in place for toilets, shower heads, and/or urinals that is more efficient than the federal standards, which were put in place by the Energy Policy Act of 1992, which is now nearly 30 years old. Several states now require greater efficiency across all 3 fixtures, while some states only require for a subset of those. Some states require an efficiency standard similar to or calling it specifically as WaterSense standards, and some are even more efficient than that. This table shows which states made the leap from the 2017 scorecard, and you can see the early adopters who had this important policy in place 2017 or earlier. The link here at the bottom will take you to a tracker of each state and their current fixture standards that are in place, and we really hope to add more states in the coming years. Next is water loss. This map shows the foundational aspect of whether or not a state has a limit in place regarding the maximum level of water loss in a utility distribution system. So meaning all the pipes and infrastructure between the treatment plants and the end users, as well as which states also require reporting of water loss audits. Managing water loss is a great way to save water, reduce stress on water supplies and our infrastructure. This is one of the questions that had multiple subparts, so feel free to go online to dig deeper to learn more. Water loss is a universal challenge in our water systems age, and many are behind on water infrastructure maintenance. So having policies in place that support this type of work is a really critical lever. One great example is Georgia, who received the highest score for this question, and Georgia requires each water provider to annually submit water loss audits, including a certification statement by a qualified water loss auditor, and specifies that the audits use the AWWA water audit software. One lever that we see as a powerful tool at the state level is planning. We asked about a variety of planning policies, first of which is related to requiring water providers to develop water conservation plans. They might be part of a water rights or a permitting process and/or as a more standard broad requirement of all or most water providers in a state. Many states have had these in place for some time, and 3 states added the general planning requirements since 2017, including Georgia, Florida, and New Hampshire. These are questions that also have sub-questions, so feel free to go online to dig in further. The second key planning process is drought preparedness planning. If this last year didn't show the importance of this, well, for better or worse, maybe 2023 will. Only Michigan and New York adopted this critical planning process requirement since 2017, despite nearly all states experiencing drought and increasing drought. The third planning area we explored was kind of a carryover from a special climate change supplement that was part of the 2017 scorecard. We kept 2 of the questions asking if states require water providers to have climate change related plans or reports, and if the state offers technical or financial assistance. Only California got full credit, with a handful of other states providing funding or technical assistance, but having no formal planning requirement. This last final planning area was a new area looking at how states are supporting communities and integrating water and land use planning. This is needed partly to help ensure, on one hand, that where growth and development are occurring, that there are sufficient water resources and infrastructure to meet those needs. And then where water supplies are strained, that any growth is managed smartly and strategically. So we were pleased to see this variety of states that are requiring some level of integration, however, with just a few requiring kind of bi-directional coordination. Another key lever is the ability to provide funding and technical assistance, which can provide much needed additional support to maxed out budgets and personnel. A good number of states provide some level of this already. One state, New York, added dedicated funding since the 2017 scorecard. But we have seen other states like Arizona, who you'll hear from today, have upped their level of funding support in recent years. And this funding source had to be dedicated for conservation and efficiency. So no states were awarded points if they just pointed to things like state revolving funds. Rates and water bills are the conduit that most folks interact with their water provider. Rates provide a signal of what it takes to provide reliable access to clean water. Rates can also provide a signal that water is not to be wasted. Volumetric billing is a foundational need. Otherwise, customers have no incentive to care about how much they use. There are a variety of rate structures that can encourage conservation. Most states do not have a requirement like this, and Pennsylvania was the only state to add a requirement for volumetric billing since 2017. Carrying forward from this, on the issue of affordability and equity, we asked which states provide state funding for customer water bill assistance this year. Only one state, Connecticut, even reported that they use their own state funds for such a program. The rest mostly reported use of the new, but temporary, Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, LIHWAP, which is akin to the long-standing LIHEAP program for saving energy. These funds are set to dry up this year, and we want to see this program permanently funded. We want to see states provide additional funding and states to reduce any barriers to utilities using revenue for customer assistance programs. We wrap up with 2 of the new categories. One is around water reuse, which can help maximize the use of water resources and can work in a really complementary fashion with conservation and efficiency strategies. Most states point to state revolving funds as their source of state funding for water reuse projects. Some states we notice failed to report regulations or may only have guidance in place. These states were not awarded points in this round of the scorecard. We provide a link here, and sorry, it's cut off here at the bottom, but it's also in the scorecard for you to stay up to date. The final question was around the water energy nexus. Water requires a significant amount of energy to acquire, treat, transport, and pump. Water and wastewater facilities are often some of the largest, if not the largest, energy consumers in a community too. Most states allow energy utilities to get energy efficiency credit when they fund programs that save hot water by the end user, for example. This year, the scorecard awarded points to states who allowed energy utilities to get credit for projects that save water in the distribution, aka water loss management strategies, which are a great way to reduce the embedded energy in the collection, treatment, and delivery aspects of water systems. Only California, Wisconsin, and Illinois received full credit. Here are the top recommendations that we think states should consider. While much of water is, of course, managed at the local or regional level, states can adopt policies and laws that reduce water use, demonstrate the value of water and the increasing variability in its reliability and availability, increase adoption of efficient products and technologies, and reduce barriers to an efficient and sustainable water future. Each state received its individual scorecard, which includes its overall ranking, regional ranking, a summary of their points by category, top 3 recommendations for their state, and a chart showing all scores with their score highlighted in yellow and the regional buddies highlighted in blue. Here are some links to some additional resources, including the scorecard website, our federal and state legislative watch website, the state fixture tracker, and the full scorecard grading results if you really want to do a deep dive. Next, we are going to welcome guests from 2 states, first Arizona and then Washington. We wanted you all to hear from states about how they approach the scorecard, what they're facing in terms of water issues, and how their state is tackling those tough water issues. The goal was to score every state as consistently as possible, but ultimately we know that each state is really unique. Each state has different approaches and philosophies to managing water uses, to managing regulations or requirements, which can make a project like the scorecard really challenging, but also brings us all together to learn more about what each other's doing. So I'm excited to first introduce Carol Ward, who is Deputy Assistant Director of the Water Planning and Permitting Division at the Arizona Department of Water Resources. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Liesel. I appreciate the introduction. Good morning, everyone, and happy Groundhog Day to those who celebrate the tradition. As Liesel said, I am Carol Ward, Deputy Assistant Director for the Planning and Permitting Division here at the Arizona Department of Water Resources. And you can go ahead to the next slide, please. First, I'd like to give my thanks to the Alliance for the hard work that went into this project. Evaluating the policies of 50 states is no small task. And I want to also thank everyone at the states who invested the time to participate in the survey. Given the variation in state policies, it's never apples to apples, and it really takes time to explain it. So thank you for making the effort. It is definitely time and energy well invested. In the time that I have today, I would like to touch on Arizona's particular structure for water conservation and efficiency requirements, our focus on exterior water use, how Arizona requires the connection of land use and water supply planning, and why a basic, obvious policy like the plumbing code plumbing code standards has eluded us. Next slide, please. So Arizona has held on to one of the top scorecard spots, not because we have advanced our state statutes for efficiency and conservation lately. Actually, we haven't. Arizona prefers to avoid new mandates, but that doesn't mean regulatory requirements haven't continued to strengthen. They have, thanks to our existing regulatory structure. Arizona is still benefiting from the policy enacted in 1980 in response to severe groundwater depletion. The Groundwater Management Act was hailed at the time as innovative, and it remains so 43 years later. A major element of the new code was conservation and efficiency. Next slide. The Groundwater Code established active management areas, or AMAs, in the most populous areas of the state, set management goals for each AMA, and defined 5 management periods from 1980 to 2025 in which to achieve those goals. It requires the Department of Water Resources to develop a series of 5 management plans, each with increase in conservation requirements and programs for municipal, industrial, and agricultural water users. In other words, the water providers, industrial users, which includes golf courses, and farms, in order to guide the AMAs to meet their goals. These plans are regulatory documents. They have the force of law, and the department has enforcement authority. The code's authors didn't know demand-side management. They left it to the department's technical staff, working with the regulated users, to construct the regulatory programs and requirements in those plans, ensuring that they would be realistic and practical, and enabling the plans to evolve and strengthen as technologies and experience improve over time without having to return to the legislature. Next slide. What was immediately evident to those who crafted the initial management plans and to the municipal providers building programs to meet the new requirements was the greatest opportunity, and the biggest challenge for demand reductions was landscape water use. Arizona's focus from the outset of our conservation efforts has been to change the culture of our landscapes from turf intensive to desert adapted and drought tolerant. Next slide. The first management plan in the 1980s instituted a prohibition on turf in rights of ways and medians irrigated with any amount of groundwater, which is to say virtually all of them. Only approved plants on the AMA low water use and drought tolerant regulatory plant lists are permitted. Those spaces then showcase the hardiest desert adapted trees and plants and drove production and development of new nursery stock that our sister states have also enjoyed. Next slide. I'll note too that Arizona has had the luxury of the past 40 years to foster the adoption of xeric landscapes, building and layering onto programs over time, refining and expanding education, training, and resources. Over that time, Arizonans have overwhelmingly come to expect and embrace xeric landscaping. City of Phoenix research found that in the 1980s, 70 to 90% of residential lots were significantly turfed. Today, fewer than 7% are. That was accomplished entirely without rebates. Next slide. From 2001 to 2013, which was the period in which Phoenix conducted this landscape study, Phoenix residential water use declined by 30,000 acre-feet, even as population increased by more than 151,000 people. In large part, this was due to reductions in exterior water use. And state policy was a critical piece in driving these achievements. Next slide. Arizona's requirements to coordinate land and water use planning were a hard-won aspect of the groundwater code, and they are absolutely fundamental to Arizona water management. This is accomplished through the assured and adequate water supply statutes and rules. Under these requirements, developers of proposed subdivisions in an AMA must prove that they have the legal, physical, financial, and continuous access to a 100-year water supply in order to meet the demands of the development. They must also demonstrate consistency with the regulatory management plan, which prescribes the water conservation requirements for municipal water providers and other users. The water demand associated with a proposed subdivision is evaluated in accordance with these conservation requirements. Those demands and other existing and projected demands are included in the department's assured water supply modeling. This is a lengthy and exhaustive permitting process. Only once a developer has been issued a certificate of assured water supply can they plat and sell lots. Developments within the service area of a large provider, such as the City of Phoenix, don't have to go through this process because the city has a designation of assured water supply. And this means that the city has demonstrated they have met the assured water supply requirements for current and planned development in their service area. Designated providers must go through a redesignation process every 15 years, and they carefully consider proposed new water uses to determine if they'll fit within their designation. These requirements do have teeth. This January, Governor Hobbs announced the release of the Assured Water Supply Model for the Hassayampa Subbasin, which is just to the west of Phoenix. This model showed unmet demand looking out 100 years. As a result, the department cannot issue new certificates of assured water supply in the subbasin on groundwater alone. Developers will have to acquire assured renewable water supplies. This has also occurred in the Pinal Active Management Area in 2019, halting new certificates for additional growth in that area as well. Next slide. So if we're so progressive, why is the state's plumbing code so out of date? Well, in 1981, most cities and towns in the AMAs had already amended their plumbing codes to require water efficient fixtures in new construction and then continuously kept them current. And Arizona is one of 4 states that adopted efficiency standards prior to the enactment of the federal standard. It was a battle, however, and the veterans of that don't particularly want to fight it again. The state focused instead on helping stand up and promote the voluntary water sense program. That has been very effective for Arizona. Sierra Vista in Cochise County was the first city to adopt an ordinance requiring that all new development meet water sense standards. And I should say new residential development. In recent years, Kirsten Engel championed legislation to update the plumbing code, embedding WaterSense as the standard to ensure that it would remain current, but it didn't move. If a bill is introduced again this year, it might actually make it, given the pressures on our water supplies. The attention drawn by the scorecard could assist us in this effort. Next slide. The decades of work to reduce demand in Arizona has paid off, relieving the pressure on our finite groundwater supplies and giving cities facing potentially deep reductions in Colorado River supplies time to begin ramping up their shortage plans. But less Colorado River water is our new normal. Arizona knows it cannot rest on its demand side laurels. Central Arizona providers are working to drive additional demand reductions on top of the long-term demand reductions they were already investing in and planning on. One of the first orders Governor Hobbs issued is the establishment of a water policy council to modernize the groundwater code that has been so critical to us and strengthen groundwater protections. She also announced $5 million in additional funding to support water planning. We'll see where we are the next time the scorecard comes out. Again, my thanks to the Alliance for this big lift and all the assistance and the resources that they supply, and to all of you for your attention today. I'll turn it back to Liesel.
Thank you, Carol. And I am going to now introduce our last speaker, Holly Myers, the Director of the Office of Drinking Water at the Washington State Department of Health, and excited to hear about what they've been working on and what is coming next for them. Holly, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Liesel. Good morning, everybody. I am, again, Holly Myers with the Office of Drinking Water with the State Department of Health, and I'm joined for questions by our subject matter expert, Karen Klocke, who is our Water Use Efficiency Program Coordinator with our Capacity Development Project. I just want to, you can go ahead and go to slide 2. I just want to thank our local government and state agencies that help us to be able to work through the water use efficiency changes, and it's certainly within our purview to create and work towards water use efficiency and improving our conservation, but without our support network with our state building code, Washington State Department of Ecology, Commerce, Department of Ag, and our natural resources programs, we would not be able to be implementing this. And also tremendous thanks to the Alliance. As Carol mentioned, we are indebted to having this resource. It is a tremendous amount of work to gather this information, and it provides us the opportunity to use this resource for planning, implementing, and awareness of this important activity that falls on us. Next slide, please. Our scores in the past have, of course, as others have seen, gone up and down. We are grateful to be in a position where we have gone back up to the top of our rankings. Next slide, please, which is based really on the opportunity for using our partnering agencies to help us to get to a point where we are looking for more higher efficiency use, and that is adopted by our partnering agencies. And kudos to the State Building Code Council and the Department of Labor and Industries for also recognizing the importance of water use efficiencies and creating new higher standards for water use efficiencies across our state. Our local jurisdictions are required to determine water adequacy for building permits and land use activities. So as you saw the importance in Arizona for coordinating land use actions and working with planning and developing, we are working also more with our local and state partners in land use, growth management, development within urban growth areas, and recognizing the importance of including conservation in our water system plans. And in our all of our communications, we're talking about climate resiliency and climate change, as we are recognizing droughts and climate impacts are becoming the norm rather than the exception. The water system requirements that we have changed for our water use efficiency will be covered in more detail in a future slide. Next slide, please. Alliance score increased in 2022, we believe, because of a few of our items that we have changed and adapted. First of all, the state has created a foundation of public health services funding. This is unique to Washington State. It's a sustainable funding from our legislature that provides foundational services equitably across the state. This provides local health as well as the State Department of Health to have additional funding sources for drinking water programs. And in our case, we are dedicating a new program with a program manager and 3 FTEs to developing water use efficiency programs, water adequacy, and basically that means understanding across the state who makes the determinations for water adequacy and how can we help and support the planning departments, building departments, and local health jurisdictions to make better decisions, to coordinate in a better way in those areas where we have over-allocated basins and high demands for other uses other than municipal. The state funding provides research, and we work closely alongside of our Department of Ecology, Department of Natural Resource, and even Fish and Wildlife for planning and implementation of reuse, water reuse. This is recognized by the state as an important activity within the State Department of Health's Office of Drinking Water. And we have been given the opportunity to hire a full-time planner position to dedicate coordination and collaboration for water reuse across the state. In Washington State, we have several partners that are working on aquifer storage and recovery, managed aquifer storage, and that is a lot of work and a lot of really important collaboration needed to be able to make that a success, to be able to use water, store water when it's not needed, and be able to have that available in times of high demands. The completion of the survey points also were increased our points, excuse me, and that really is thankful to the Alliance's willingness to really sit down with us and understand the details of each question. Next slide, please. Another efficiency program increase that helped to define how we use our water and what we need for growing communities is that we have been implementing the municipal water law, which was passed in 2003. But as we all know, it takes time to really understand what's needed and how to plan and implement in our municipal water systems. And we then created additional water use efficiency requirements for all of our municipal water users. The municipal water law gave us more flexibility to allow consolidations and expansions within our service areas. The Washington Water Code is unique, and so we have to work very carefully with our partners to understand and support the development and the water system growth and management of their plans. We developed Washington State works closely with our tribal partners, state, and also local partners. And so as we're working through each legislative session, we're often seeing demands, changes, and suggestions for better ways of managing municipal, agricultural, and in-stream for fish and habitat uses. And the only way that we're going to be able to continue to adapt and improve our water use efficiencies is to collaborate. We're working very hard to make sure that that's a priority for all of us in all of our activities. Next slide, please. So the water use efficiency requirements that I mentioned, ours require that the customers set goals and are involved in the goal setting process, that we are focusing on supply and demand water use efficiency, and that we have a new 10% leak standard and expectation. In 2017, we required all water systems to install service meters, and we are requiring that all systems plan, implement, and report water use efficiencies. That is something that is within Karen's purview. She works with and coordinates with water systems. We also are looking for opportunities to increase our communications, our relationships with our local agencies, and getting our planners and engineers out into the communities to improve and continue to coordinate as we address climate change impacts moving forward. Next slide, please. As a result, the program, the requirements that we have created have included a positive water savings. We have shown the benefits of our increased coordination with our communities. As I said, our planners and engineers have worked together to create guidance and technical assistance documents, as well as building relationships and communicating directly with our communities. Our program emphasizes accountability and compliance with requirements. As most folks know, compliance and enforcement is always a two-way street. We get much further if we're providing technical assistance and guidance than we do if we're being heavy-handed with compliance. So our water use efficiency is a supportive and collaborative effort. Our water use efficiency is greater than just water savings. It's about saving energy and saving money. It's about supporting economics and understanding the rate structures and supporting technical, managerial, and financial water system operations. We continue to be focused on helping systems to succeed by meeting the requirements, but also listening and providing input to them as they are changing and adapting their water systems. Next slide, please. So we're very grateful for the SCORE, for the opportunity to have this resource to see that we have the changes that we've implemented are successful. While whether or not it shows on a scorecard, we definitely feel like our direction, although we've all been dealing with the pandemic for the past several years, our direction has been certainly warranted to be going in the right way. And we are seeing support from our legislature with new bills to continue in the path of water use efficiencies. And although currently we have a conservation requirement in our water system plans, there's currently a proposed Senate bill that would require all water systems with greater to or equal to 1,000 connections to have a climate resilience element in their water system plans. This will be defined as it goes through the sausage maker, that is legislation, as most of you know. We will follow through, and we are watching that closely, but it is expected as the bill is written that it would be guidance and technical assistance for all new requirements, that the efforts would also be funded, and we would be looking for climate readiness projects to be included in water system plans. And it sounds a little similar to what Arizona is talking about in having a 100-year water supply source. That's not necessarily what our proposal is, but just thinking about that, it sounds a little like that future funding ideas and preparedness. So we are looking forward to continuing the work that we've started and the changes that have been made. We appreciate our partners again for not only giving us the opportunity to work side by side to implement new standards in the water use efficiency through the building codes, but also to continue to work with the Alliance for looking for opportunities for sharing information, providing support and technical assistance, not only to our consumers and our customers that are providing water, but also to communicate with our tribal, federal, state, and local partners to think outside of the box and look for continuing ideas and suggestions for improving water use efficiency in Washington State. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Holly. And with that, I'm going to turn to Rachel to help us moderate the Q&A. You can, of course, continue to submit questions through the Q&A function. And of course, where it makes sense, please highlight who your question is for. Rachel?
Yes, so as we kind of wait, if any more questions come in, I do have one to start off with. It came in for Carol. So if the water plans in Arizona have the force of law and require a 100-year assurance of water supply, how did the development at Rio Verde get away with using a temporary and unsustainable source from Scottsdale?
That is a great question, and one that we're getting a lot. I think many of you on the webinar will be familiar with Rio Verde foothills. Many of the folks in that area, which those homes do not have a assured water supply, many of them have seen wells going dry, and water haulers have been providing water to them. Those water haulers were able to get water from the city of Scottsdale. But due to shortages on the Colorado River, which are going to hit the city of Scottsdale very hard, part of the first stage of their drought plan, there is to be no more water hauling. The city of Scottsdale is requiring very significant cuts already from its customers, and it doesn't feel that it should be enabling that when it's asking its customers to reduce their use significantly and gearing up for really deep shortage. That happened because, as I said, that community does not have an assured water supply, and the requirement was not necessary there because there is, it hinges really on the definition of what a subdivision is. An assured water supply is required of subdivisions, and those are defined as 6 or more lots. If you have a developer that is splitting off just a few lots at a time, they're able to sell those lots without proving an assured water supply. And that's really a cautionary tale. And it also speaks to the effectiveness of our policy to link land use planning and water supply. You should not be building if you are not ensuring that there is a water supply for that community. And it really functions as a consumer protection law for us, in addition to just good, sensible water planning.
Thank you. The next question for both Arizona and Washington is large water meter accuracy and apparent losses, for example, a focus area for you?
This is Holly. I can, unless Karen has jumped on, I can't see if somebody else is.
Go ahead, Holly.
Okay, I'm sorry. We are adding that as part of our priority for the foundational public health team that we have stood up, and that is something that is, I wouldn't consider it a priority issue because we don't have a significant loss, but we definitely have the ability to monitor and make improvements, and so that is something that is within that purview of our new program that we stood up for the foundational public health services.
Hi, this is Karen. I think I might work now. One of the things we're working on this past couple weeks is to make a shopping list of the people that have the highest leakage rates down. So we took the first about 75 across the state, and we're currently working with our planners and engineers out in the regions to see if there's something we can do to help them. Is it just math mistakes, or they don't understand the formula to do the reporting, or what? You know, we're out there trying to help them. So there's about 79, 75, 79. And with that, helping them go that way, we're hoping to be able to use some of the SRF funds that we've got coming available. So that's it for me.
Sorry, Rachel, if you'd like me to pick up that question, could you repeat it for me again, please?
Yes. Is large water meter accuracy and apparent losses a focus area for you?
Well, not specifically in statute for us, but distribution system water loss control has been critical since the 1980 Groundwater Management Code was enacted. We do have a requirement to maintain losses at 10% or less for large providers. For small providers, it's 15% or less. In recent years, the Department of Water Resources, working with the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority, has funded a number of technical assistance programs for providers, first focusing on small providers outside of the active management areas that tend to struggle more with water loss. And then more recently, the department funded a pilot by the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association that focused on very large water providers within the Phoenix AMA, really going deep into how to identify and control distribution system water loss. And one of the things that it did focus on was the meter accuracy, among the many other areas where you can capture that lost water, whether it is real or apparent.
Thank you. I have a question for kind of the AWE side. What state representatives were contacted to complete the surveys? Was it the same contact for all the states? How likely do you think that it could be the survey sponsors were inaccurate?
I can start, and then maybe Brad or Adam if you want to chime in. So we started from the context that we had from the 2017 survey, and as you can imagine, there's been some turnover, and so Brad did a great job at tracking down the new state contacts at the different states. So we did get in touch with someone at every state. Brad or Adam, do you want to maybe speak to some additional information about how maybe we went about filling in gaps or verifying answers?
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about that kind of process. Not every state fully filled out the survey or had as much answers as they possibly could, but that just came down to me and Adam kind of doing our own research or going back to the states, or if the state said, hey, we really don't know if we do this, it might not be in this department, try and see if they could recommend another department, or we'd make other calls to other departments, see if they might have those answers. Adam does a phenomenal job of looking through legal documents and finding information that states might have missed. So between all those, just reaching out to other departments, our own research, and just combining all that, we were able to fill in most of the gaps, I'd say.
And I'll just add, I think Brad did a fantastic job of tracking down anybody relevant that could possibly speak to some of the questions that were on the questionnaire. And we also had the information from 5 years ago as a bit of a baseline, verifying, looking at the statutes, regulations, other data points referenced there to make sure that they were still accurate, as well as any of the other information that was added from those various resources and individuals that Brad tracked down to supplement that information and provide those sort of updates to what we know from 5 years ago.
Great, thank you. I have one more. I'm not quite sure if it's specific to the state plans or if it's specific to AWE staff. Are you planning on including any objective measures to water efficiency, such as statewide residential water use, more geared towards the impacts of conservation, rather than the programs that should support the water efficiency?
I can take this one. I think this is a great thing for us to consider, and it's a question we get a lot. One of the challenges can be that there are many water providers across the U.S., and gathering that information in a consistent and regular way would be a big lift. Not to say impossible, but a big lift. One thing that we have considered is maybe a stepping stone to that is to start looking at which states are requiring some sort of reporting of that information. So we know some states already do this, and looking at that type of requirement where it is being summed up at the state level or required by a state agency. Because I think the more states that do that, then the easier it would be to get to that next level of looking at more of these additional metrics that might help give us a more robust picture of what is going on as a result of some of these policies that are in place.
Yeah, and this is Ron. I'll just add, each time we do the scorecard, we learn something new about how to better evaluate where states stand. And this is certainly something we're contemplating, is whether we can incorporate, I should say, actual consumption data, into our evaluation. As Liesel said, it's difficult. But for those on the line and anybody else who listens to this later, we'd love your suggestions on how to improve the scorecard. We added some new questions this time around. We've already come across some areas where we think we can improve next time. For example, a number of states substantially increased their funding for water efficiency this time around, and our scoring didn't necessarily account for significant funding versus a relatively small amount of funding. Shout out to states like Arizona and Utah, for example, that have substantially increased their funding for water efficiency. We've had some suggestions to look a little more closely at outdoor water use, both in the landscape setting as well as agriculture setting. We touch on those things for sure, but there's interest in evaluating those a little bit more thoroughly as well. And so we'd appreciate anyone's suggestions for ways to improve the scorecard. Really appreciate it.
Great. And that's all of our questions and all of our time today. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Great.
well, thank you again, everyone, for your time. Thank you, Rachel, for walking us through the questions. Again, big thanks to all the state agency personnel who helped, to our staff, Liesel and Brad, in particular, to Adam from the Environmental Law Institute, and everyone who contributed to this scorecard. We really appreciate your help. And thanks for everyone for tuning in today. Have a good day.